Hi everyone that's just arrived. My name's Duncan Bennett. I'm Managing Director at Not Sport. I lead on sports pitch projects here and sit on technical committees for the sports pitch industry, the artificial turf sports pitch industry, I hasten to add. And today's presentation is designed to give you an understanding of the changes that are coming through in synthetic turf, both in terms of legislation, innovation. So the aim of the presentation is to give you an overview of what's happening, an understanding of what it means to you as an asset holder, as a pitch user or pitch owner, and what companies like us can advise and support you with in the months and years to come. We're working in partnership with Lettings, and Nick Bowen, Director, is also on the webinar, and he'll be doing a section of the presentation towards the end about how Edu can support you with letting management and the services they offer, which, as the presentation will explain, can create a really robust business case for your artificial turf pitch project. So we're going to go through the presentation and yeah, just be interactive, speak to us via the chat function if you've got any questions. Yeah, we'll hopefully get it all wrapped up in around an hour, including the Q&A. So we'll crack on. Mark's going to click through the slides. So the first one, well, yeah, it's title slide. So yeah, you know the title of it because you signed up to it. So there's lots of changes happening in artificial turf sports facilities, mainly on the 3G side of things, which is where the focus of the presentation will be. So we will guide you through that. And as I mentioned, if you can just click back one slide, Mark, there you go. There are various aims that we want to set out at the start that hopefully by the end of the hour, you'll be up to speed on. Firstly, an introduction to sustainability and the changes that are coming in on artificial grass pitches. How we can integrate that into your project, both from a sort of initial design phase, but also thinking about the future and making sure that what will be inevitably a strategic investment, likely large investment, is future-proofed and sustainable, not just in the short term, but also in the longer term as well. And we'll explain how Edu can fit into that. We'll touch on how the legislation coming in, likely next year, affects 3G pitches and what that means in terms of surface choice, particularly for football. We, as a company, Not Sport, also offer something called fast track funding, which allows you to spread the cost of a project without any capital contribution, or with some, if you've got reserves, or with sink funds, etc. If you've got an existing pitch. Fast track funding can get your project over the line in terms of a funding option. So we'll touch on that as well. And then Nick will take over and introduce Lettings. And at the end, hopefully, we've got a summary and leave you with some ideas to take away, and any questions you want to field for Nick and I, we can deal with at that point at the end. But as I say, submit via the chat function, and Mark can flag them for me as we work through. So where does sustainability fit? So this is a buzzword. The reality of what we do as an industry isn't particularly strong from an environmental point of view. If we're building new, it's largely digging up natural turf fields and putting in artificial grass, which is a plastic product. And the reality is that plastic is becoming a bit of a pejorative term. It's got negative sort of connotations to it. So what we're trying to do as an industry, and particularly here at Not Sport, is explain how we can present a sustainable solution from a design point of view, reducing the impact on the environment as much as we can, adhering to the new legislation that's coming in to protect the environment, which we'll go on to in the next few slides. And also not just sustainability from an environmental point of view, creating sustainable solutions from a cost point of view, a life cost point of view, and so sustainability in all its sort of facets. And to do that, we need to think about it right from the start. So the purpose of this sort of presentation and webinar is to set that out right from the outset, that if we're going to be thinking about the impact of what we're going to do today and how it will affect people in 5-10 years time, or 10-15 years time if we look at a resurface, then we need to be making design choices and have an understanding of that here today in 2022 into 2023 at inception stage. So if you've got an existing pitch, what is a resurface project going to look like now, and what are the choices we can make that will affect the ability to resurface and dispose of the pitch in 10 years' time, say. And what we'll do with you as a business is take you from inception through the feasibility stage, outlining those options, narrowing them down into a design that will meet your criteria now and in the future. That then becomes a specification that becomes, more often than not, at least a tender document against which the contractors of our industry will tender. They will then construct the pitch against that. Nick and his team, you as the client and the asset owner, will manage the facility through to a point where there's a pitch resurface, where the whole cycle again starts again. So this is with a 3G surface, average life 10 years. These are choices that you can make that will affect, if you make them today, affect things that happen in 10 years' time at the point of resurface. So it sounds quite complicated. It sounds like there's lots of different combinations and factors at play, which there is. What we can do as a company is guide you through that and allow you to make informed decisions that will protect your investment now and in the future. And that key management area, managing the process through, you're getting good asset and user engagement is key, both at the start and at the end when you're using your pitch and getting income lettings in evenings and weekends. So I've mentioned how we can think about sustainability. It's right at the start. It's at the forefront of what we do as a business, and every project that we do in terms of a feasibility report when we come out and visit is aligned to both short-term sustainable measures and then the longer-term impact of making design choices today. So there's environmental sustainability, as I say, and then there's financial sustainability to make sure that what we do is going to last, both from a durability and an environmental point of view, but also produce the outcomes from a financial point of view that you're looking to achieve as well. So this is environmental and financial sustainability. And on every scheme we do, we will field initial inquiries here at the office. We'll chat through with customers, hopefully like yourself, in the days and weeks to come about what it is you're looking to achieve. And then we'll initially have a chat about these sorts of points raised in the bottom left-hand corner. We will then come out and physically visit you on site where all this sort of comes more live, and we can put a bit of flesh on the bones. But initially, having an understanding of what the facility rationale, as we call it, is quite key. So what are the performance requirements that are in place? What are the future considerations? What's going to happen in the next 10 years? What level of community usage are you looking to deliver? And what space have you got available will indicate and tell us what sort of pitch size you can go for. And then when we come out, we'll assess ground conditions if indeed they aren't sort of available to us in the report that you have already. So the performance requirements are really based on you telling us what type of facility you want. The presentation today is focusing on 3G pitches, and the performance requirements for 3G pitches are set by FIFA for football and World Rugby for rugby. And they're the two main sports that are played on 3G. In the UK, it's football that leads and rugby sort of follows. There are pockets where that's slightly different, but rugby league and rugby union can be played on 3G if we design it in certain ways that we achieve World Rugby. So just to explain that point, FIFA have a set of standards for football. Rugby have a set of standards that are very similar, but that require slightly different elements to be included, the main one of which is a shot pad. So if you want rugby on a pitch, we have to understand that early so we can include that shot pad element from the outset, because that is quite a sizable cost element too. And what we often do with companies like Edu and work with Nick and you as an end user is actually find out whether the use of rugby is going to be for competition matches at weekend. Maybe you've got links with a community rugby club or a local rugby club, or whether it's more going to be touch rugby, teaching, coaching, because those two differences will impact on whether you need to invest in that shot pad. If you want full contact, competitive rugby to be played, there's no getting around it. You have to have a shot pad layer. If you just want to play touch, if you just want to do some introductory rugby skills drills, coaching, then potentially you don't need the shot pad element, albeit it would be good practice to do it. So all these things are sort of the outset of it. So we understand what it is that you are trying to achieve as a customer. Then as pitch designers, and which is the role that we fulfill as a company, we will then talk to you about all the different features that a pitch incorporates, the choices that are available, and the impact of each choice on the next element of a pitch. So that might sound a bit confusing, but hopefully the next slides will explain. So NotSport act for customers as their specialist design partners. We aren't a contractor. We don't come and build a pitch. We'll come out and visit you, assess your footprint. So that might be to build new, where drainage would obviously be required, or it might be to assess an existing pitch that you're looking to resurface, upgrade. It could even be, and we're doing a lot of this at the moment, an assessment of for example, bank of tarmac courts that were built 20 years ago. They're sort of a bit underutilized now because they're out of date. Can we upgrade those to a more modern multi-use facility, or even a 3G mini pitch or something along those lines? So we'll come out and assess that, and when we do, we'll talk to you about these elements we're about to go through, some of which are more relevant to new builds than others, as I mentioned, drainage. So a pitch designer, under the requirements these days in Britain, we need to make sure that we design drainage solutions that cope with a storm event of 1 in 100 years plus 30%. In some areas it's plus 40% or 50%, but usually it's plus 30%. So as you can imagine, a storm event that is going to happen once in 100 years is quite significant. And that understanding of what your ground conditions are will inform us as to how we can develop a robust, sustainable drainage solution that will cope in that storm event. And if where we're doing new build, you're going to need planning permission, planners and drainage engineers at the local planning authority will accept it because it's been well considered, thought through, and meets all the criteria. The impact of drainage is quite interesting because there's more and more innovation in base technology coming on the market, which is great news because more innovation gives more option. A lot of that innovation also can potentially, anyway, reduce cost. So one option that we use as a business is a base solution that replaces the need for tarmac and a shot pad with one single thick product. But we can only do that, or realistically, from a cost point of view, we can only do that if we don't need to build a big depth of stone to cope with the type of drainage that I've just mentioned. So understanding the drainage criteria and then what your ground conditions are is key to understanding how big or deep we need to build the base, and then how big or deep we need to build the base will affect your ability to design out the next element, which is the base. So, so where we are inheriting a pitch, you've already got it, you've had it for 10, 12, 20 years, whatever it may be, and you're looking to resurface, then you've got an existing base construction. Depending on when the pitch was built, it might be in a good condition, it might need a bit of TLC, or unfortunately, in some cases, it isn't fit for purpose. It was built to a standard and in a way 20, 25 years ago that perhaps we wouldn't build to these days, and it's just not going to provide sufficient constructional stability for the new type of surface that goes on top of it. So when we come out and visit an existing pitch, what we'll try to do initially is get an understanding of what the pitch construction is. And then if we're working with you over a longer period of time on your resurface project, we'll do further investigation into that pitch base. But the reality is a full-sized hockey pitch or football pitch is going to be 6,000 to 7,500 square meters. It's virtually impossible, if not impossible, to know the condition of the underlying base that sat in the ground for 20 years with an artificial grass over the top of it. We can't know every single square meter of the pitch and what its condition is until we remove the existing surface. So again, we'll explain all this with you if you've got an existing pitch. But one of the key criteria for us and for anybody looking at a pitch from our industry, it should be to understand what the existing base construction is and what quality it was built to, which can be challenging and there's no getting around it. If you're building new, then we'll be stripping turf, topsoil off and building a base on top of that drainage design that we've just spoke about. and we can design that new. So we can either build in mitigation, reduce the amount of stone depending on your ground conditions, but that will be led and informed by what we find through a ground investigation. So all this is designed to explain step by step that you don't have a choice on ground conditions. In fairness, your ground conditions are your ground conditions. But what we come to understand about this, the site that you've got will inform us as to how to design the drainage. That will therefore impact and inform us as to what we can do with the base construction, which, if we click to the next slide, also impacts on your options and potentially your choice of what shock pad to use. So there's 3 different types of shock pads that we've got photos of here. The most common one in the UK is a bottom left corner. That's a rubber 15 mil, so quite thin, but a rubber layer that's mixed on site and then spread almost like a plasterer on a wall, but obviously he's doing it on a tarmac base here, over an existing base or a new tarmac base. The picture actually shows a resurface project there. So we inherited an existing pitch and then designed a resurface. And on this occasion, there was a need for a new shock pad, and that could be installed over an existing tarmac base. On the upper right, the gentleman there on his hands and knees pressing down a tile in the yellow coat. That tile that you can sort of see is about 40 mil thick. So I mentioned the rubber shock pad was about 15. This is about 40, and it's an expanded polypropylene product that we call Shockwave. I won't bore you with all the technical details of what that all means, but what it effectively does is provide a sustainable solution on a new build scheme where we can eliminate the need for a tarmac layer because of the structural strength of that particular product, that particular type of system. So if your ground conditions are suitable and we can develop a robust drainage design, then potentially we can do away with the cost of an expensive tarmac layer, install that type of product on as little as 150 mil of stone. So we're reducing the amount of stone by about half compared to a tarmac base. We're getting rid of the tarmac as well. And so from an environmental and sustainability story, there's a lot less impact on the built environment. We're using less quarried aggregates. Instead of on a full-size pitch probably having 600 articulated lorry loads of stone and tarmac coming in, we're down at maybe 250, 300. So there's less CO2 emissions, and we can again explain how that sustainable approach from an environmental point of view could benefit you as a customer. And then the top left is again another resurface that we did. I think it might be Sandbach School actually. But that pitch there, the client had an existing tarmac base that was in really good condition. They could have used a rubber pad, which is the one that we're looking at down in the bottom left again. But on the top left, that white roll that's being laid out, that is a prefabricated foam pad, 10 to 12 mil thick. But that is potentially 50% recycled content and is fully recyclable at the end of its life, which comes with a 24-year warranty. So that, again, from a performance warranty point of view, is double the bottom left product, and it's recyclable at the end of its life. So in terms of making design choices, as I say now, that will impact on the sustainability arguments, the cost impact, and also the way you can dispose of it in the years to come. And obviously we appreciate in that sort of 10, 20 year sort of scale, it might not be you that's doing the resurface project at your particular site that you're working at the moment, but what you choose to do now will be inherited by somebody, and then they're left with the choice and the impact of what's made in 2022 or 2023 as we sit here today. So your base will impact on the options you have in terms of shock pad, and your base will be led in part by what you can do from a drainage point of view, or indeed the quality of the base that you've got on an existing pitch. So this is where all the complexities come in, and this is where a company such as ourselves can work with you to explain what this means for your site. What we can't do in a presentation like this is explain every single connotation that might happen, that you might have on your site. We'll need to come out and see you, do a free pitch condition survey to basically present to you what it means on your site. There's so many different variables and things like that even on an existing pitch, it's very difficult for us to cover every single eventuality. This is just designed to give you a bit of a flavour. And then in terms of the surface choice, so we're looking predominantly at 3Gs today. There's sand dressed surfaces for hockey. Sand filled still exists, which is the sort of older fashioned type stuff from better versions of, but the sort of technology that was being used in the 80s and 90s. So sand dressed surfaces are your multi-use surface for hockey, but 3G surfaces are where a lot of people look at, particularly from a business case point of view, because here in England and Britain, probably Europe in fairness, football is the most popular sport. So if you're going to build a facility based on generating income and a strong underlying business case, more often than not, it's a 3G surface that gives you the opportunity to achieve that. And your choice of surface, there's lots of different, again, variations within 3G surfacing, and 3G surfaces are generically what we call surfaces for football. And as I mentioned earlier, potentially rugby, if you have one of those shot pads incorporated into your project that we just ran through on the previous slide. So your upper left photo there shows a pitch that we did down in North London that was a new build with that tile technology that we just looked at. So we were able to reduce that impact. Largely that was led because the access to that footprint was pretty ropey, to be honest. It was through the school, it was along those tennis courts on that tight sort of area next to those parked cars. So if we could reduce the amount of articulated lorry movements, it was going to be beneficial to the school because of the access not being perfect. And what you can see there is football markings and rugby markings on there. The pitch also has rugby posts. If you've got very good eyesight, you can just about make them out. But the football is the priority for the school. But then they have links, I think it's Rickmansworth Rugby Club, that come in and use it for junior matches up to the age of 12, I believe, and also adult training. So that had to be designed to meet rugby performance. That was because they had a latent demand in their area and a business case built around both football and rugby. You might be in an area of the country where football is the priority and everything else has to fit around that, which is more of the surfacing layout that you see on the other two photos. So working with us, we can identify the different design options, and then Nick at EDU can talk to you about what the demand is in your particular area and identify the type of usage that would be producing the most income without compromising what you need to deliver as a school or a site owner. So again, all these factors and all the different stakeholders, we need to understand what that is so we can then make and give you informed advice as to what surface options are. So the biggest change, we'll go on to fencing and lighting. Yeah, your fencing and your lighting is also critical. So there's different types of fencing for different sports. You can supplement that with netting to keep footballs in. If you've got people blasting the ball, quite often they're flying out of fenced enclosure. You can have different colours. You can have lower fencing for spectators. So again, if you're envisioning on your pitch, even if it was existing, that you're going to have more and more spectators arriving, you might want to look at the type of fencing in the bottom left-hand corner, which is a lower height, so spectators can lean over it on a weekend or an evening and have a better experience from a viewing point of view than staring through a 3 metre high blue fence that's in the bottom right, or a fence topped with netting on the top right. So again, all these are discussions to have, as is the choice of lighting, which is the next slide. So it's increasingly rare, albeit it still happens, that we can't design a lighting system with our lighting partners. I hasten to add, it's not strictly us, but our lighting partners can design lighting with modern LEDs that will have a very, very limited impact onto the environment around them. You can see these photos taken at night and how the light spill is back to effectively pitch darkness within about 10-15 meters of the pitch. When I started in the industry 20 years ago, we were probably 20-30 meters plus outside the pitch footprint. So even if you're in a tight site, there is a reasonable chance that we can develop a lighting design to give you community use in the evenings and weekends that again underpins that business case from a letting point of view. I mentioned LEDs, metal halide, which is the older fashioned type of lighting. It still exists, people still use it, but increasingly planners are expecting to see LED because it's got a greater control on spill and glare. And for you as a customer, the running costs, as energy rates fly up, this I'm sure will be key, the running costs of LED systems are much, much lower, just as they are in your house, and I'm sure in your wider school buildings and stuff. LEDs do run at a much lower cost. So whilst there is still a slight uplift for LED lighting on pitches, the actual payback on that difference is usually now in no more than 4 or 5 years, if not less than that, depending on the amount of usage you can get in the evenings and weekends. So there's 2 types of lighting anyway, metal halide and LED. More and more people using LED. And again, we'll design that with partners to make sure it's compliant, both from reducing the impact as much as we can on the residents nearby, but also there are standards that exist for football, for rugby, for hockey, for tennis, for netball. So again, depending on what you're looking to achieve, will impact on what the intensity of light that's needed and the sporting compliance that that brings. So again, we'll guide you through that. If you've got an existing pitch, then it could well be possible to relamp the existing columns with new technology of the LEDs. So we might not have to rip out columns and bases and put in a brand new system to provide LEDs for you. It could be we can relamp, and that is usually quite a cost-effective way. And the payback on that is very, very quick, because instead of a 50-odd grand investment on new, it's a potentially 20, 25 grand investment on a relamp, just new light fittings basically, and then that should pay back within a couple of years, if not sooner. So all this sort of fits into a analysis, both from a sustainability point of view, from the environmental, even on the environmental impact of the lighting, right through to the sustainability of the business case that underpins anything like this, where you're looking to use a company like EDU to generate lettings and income. And then there's also other areas to consider. So if you've got a strong link with a football club and they're going to use it for competitive matches, do they want dugouts? Are you going to brand them? Again, your choice on that will be led in some ways by cost, but also by what it is it's going to add value to your project potentially. And then you've got your equipment. If you're going to have rugby, do you need full rugby posts like the bottom left-hand corner, or is it going to be more skills drills coaching and the rugby posts aren't really needed because you're not going to be doing place kicking or anything along those lines? So all these factors are built in, and so our initial assessment and conversations with you as customers will be to bring all this together and then produce you a dedicated bespoke report that you can make some informed decisions of. Well, actually, I'd love to do rugby, but the usage I'm going to get is 2 hours a week. I'm never going to get payback on that shock pad layer. So as much as I'd like to do it, I'm not going to. Or actually the rugby club down the road, they've got 6 or 7 junior teams. With Nick and the team at EDU, we can really sort of focus on that. And the payback on the shock pad layer is going to be, 2 years or something. After that, all that rugby income is just going to be profit. So we can look at the sustainability arguments of usage and financially set against the capital costs, so you can make informed choices as to whether it's worth it. Final point on that is a lot of schools will say, well, actually, to give us a multi-curricular facility, even if there isn't the payback, we still want to offer rugby for the school. So actually, we accept that it's a cost, but we want to deliver it. It's not a financial case, it's a value case for our kids in terms of curriculum activity and multi-sport. So all these things factor in, and again, you make the informed choice with us advising you in the right ways. So I mentioned 3G. So this is the nuts and bolts of the changes, really. So this slide, to give you the context behind it, some of you might have seen about 4 years ago, maybe 5, there was stuff coming out of America that was suggesting that the rubber crumb, the black rubber granules that you get in 3Gs, were carcinogenic and they were causing issues for kids from a health point of view. All that was completely sort of debunked, and loads of different evidence from our industry and health experts all proved that there was no link. So that was great. But at the same time, in Scandinavia, there was actually an argument, nothing to do with the health impacts, but on the environmental impact of black rubber crumb. And this was because the EU were looking at ways of reducing the amount of microplastics getting into the environment. Unfortunately for us as an industry, those black rubber crumb granules fall under the classification of what a microplastic is. So it wasn't necessarily led as a, let's go after synthetic turf pitches. It was led as, there's too much microplastics in the environment, it's getting into the food chain. We need to reduce that because the impact on humans as it gets in the food chain is arguably unknown, but nonetheless is unlikely to be any good for us. So we need to reduce that impact. How can we do that? What are the biggest industries that use microplastics? And that was when people started going, well, hold on, what are those black rubber crumbs? How are they getting into watercourses? How are fish ingesting them and then getting into the food chain? So about 4 or 5 years ago, the environmental green lobby in Scandinavia started to pay for their research into it to coincide with the assessment of microplastics generally. And then it's resulted, to bring you into 2022-23 without going through every step, it's resulting in a European-wide ban on microplastics getting into the environment. So this is the intentional, what we call the intentional introduction of microplastics. And I said rubber crumb is classed as a microplastic. Well, we're intentionally brushing it into the surface. We're not intentionally letting it get into watercourses, but that's the terminology that, that the legislation is going to be signed off next year on. So this impacts not just on artificial turf industry, it impacts on clothing because there's a huge proportion of plastics in clothing. So all tumble dryers, for example, have filters in fitted as of, well, they're already getting fitted now in newer models as they are in washing machines. It'll impact on agriculture, slow release fertilizers, they're coated in plastic, so that's not going to be allowed. The sort of exfoliating little bubbles and balls that you get in shower gels, they're largely plastic, so they're going to go as well. So this is a big impact for every industry. Unfortunately for us as an industry and for users like you that have got pitches potentially or are looking at doing pitches with 3G, it's going to limit the availability of rubber crumb in the years to come because the legislation is going to be passed almost certainly. There's still a fractional chance it might not, but it's all been signed off by the legislators for recommendation by the relevant countries now. So it's unlikely that it will get repealed, if you like, at the point that the legislators start signing it off into law. Still a fractional chance, but we're basically accepting as an industry rubber crumb as of next year will be classed as a microplastic and will fall foul of this particular ban. Now, what that means is that if you've got an existing pitch, you don't have to rip everything out, nothing like that. So there's no scare attached with that sort of thing. And there'll be a 6-year transition for anybody using microplastics. Now, what that means is that if we build or resurface a pitch in 2023, the year that this legislation is almost certainly going to be signed off, then you've got 6 years where you can still procure that rubber crumb in our world here and can continue using it for maintenance. At the end of that 6 years, or more realistically, probably a year or two before that, as the supply drops and the cost goes up, you won't be able to, at the end of that 6 years, it will be illegal to sell it, and therefore you won't be able to buy it. And so if you're investing in a pitch in 2023 and you're okay for 6 years, but the surface lasts 10 on average, maybe 12 if it's well maintained, you really don't want to be getting into a situation in 2029 with 4, potentially 6 years left of your surface where you can't use new rubber crumb to top up, to maintain and keep the performance going. So the conversations we're having with customers now are, you can still go with rubber crumb. This is the impact that I've just explained. If you don't want to go down that route, because it could be argued as being short-sighted at the moment, there are other options that are shown on this particular slide. So we could use cork infill, we could use birch, which is that one at the middle at the top, olive pips, walnut shells, brock is a wood chip product imported from America. But the reality is none of these are particularly good. The wood chip one is probably at the moment the better option of a fairly lousy bunch, if I'm being brutally honest. But nonetheless, you could switch from rubber crumb to this sort of infill, and you would know that you could still access these infills. in the years to come. So you're future-proofing your investment. The downside of all this, as you can probably guess, is that anything new costs a bit more, so your capital cost will go up, but at least you'll have peace of mind. The other way of doing it is to use something like an unfilled surface. An unfilled 3G is what we're moving towards, particularly in Europe, in Holland and Germany, Netherlands and Germany, I should probably say, that they've moved, and Switzerland and parts of Germany actually, they've moved and said basically, do you know what? At the moment, none of these alternative infills are performing as we would like. So what we'll do is get rid of all the infill, maybe just a dressing of sand to give it a bit of ballast and stability. And we'll just have a really dense, heavy artificial grass product that is packed full of fibre, basically. And so we've used that for the first time in London in the summer just gone. We've got another project down in Somerset where we'll be using one of the even later innovations on that sort of technology. And of course, what that does is give you complete certainty, because you don't need any infill to worry about in the years to come. So in reality, at the moment, if you're looking at a resurface of an existing pitch towards 3G, if you're looking at developing a new 3G pitch, it's speaking to companies like us about what the options are. And because of the stress that it's putting on the industry, there's more and more innovation coming through. So some of these products, I'm sure, will be superseded by things that are better, which is also a consideration to make. But the impact on you as particularly a pitch holder, but as well as a new build, is none of these products provide the shock absorbency, the softness of rubber. So if you can't provide the shock absorbency that the rubber gave, you need to replace the shock absorbency to still maintain a FIFA performance level or an FA performance level. And in that scenario, you have to then replace what was provided by rubber with a shock pad underneath. So again, your choice of surface will, flipping back a few slides, impact on the choice of shock pad. So this is where it does get a bit complicated. Again, I can't give you answers on every single scenario that exists. It's a case of us coming out, understanding what your existing pitch or your new pitch is going to be for, how it's going to work, the options in terms of surface and infill, and then you can make informed decisions. And there's still plenty of customers using rubber crumb, and they're accepting that, you know what, we'll just have to build up bulk stocks to brush in after year 6, and you know, we'll purchase them before the ban, and that's still perfectly legal, which it is. Whether that's the right thing from an environmental point of view will depend on your particular sort of view on that particular element. But we'll give you the options. We'll continue to liaise with manufacturers and test some of these infills. There's still new ones coming through now, and at some point we'll no doubt find better options than what we've got at the moment. But it's not a great story, I'm afraid, in the sense that there's not a ready-made solution. There are options, and we're just testing these as an industry because of that ban I've mentioned. So it gets more complicated. It needs a bit of understanding. It needs a company like us potentially to come out and just do a bit of an education piece for PE staff, for you as asset owners, and work with Nick to make sure that whatever we choose is also going to meet the requirements of the users at evenings and weekends. And then that also impacts on what happens at the end of life. So if you're looking at a pitch resurface, great, we've all spoken there about the different options in terms of surface and new infill technology. We can now also recycle turf at the end of its life, which is a far better way of disposing of artificial turf than what's historically been a case where it gets stripped and ripped and then installed in, you know, farmers' fields, in under cattle grids and things like that, or in golf bunkers. So there's now bona fide ways that we can uplift the carpet, send it to recycling plants. It doesn't get recycled back to new artificial turf. We're not quite at that point yet, but it will be recycled into construction materials, blocks for Harris fencing, for acoustic boarding, for plaster boarding, and also for ancillary features of an artificial turf pitch. So there's a product that's made from recycled carpet that you can make into a kickboard. So you could use, you know, recycled carpet for features around the pitch, not physically the pitch itself at this stage, but maybe that'll come in the years to come. The impact of that is that, again, if you've got sustainability goals, visions, statements as an organisation, disposing of it in that way might well tie into what you're trying to achieve as an organisation, as a trust, as an academy, as a sports club. And again, we'll explain that. The cost impact isn't quite what you might think it is. It's probably going to add maybe £10,000 to the cost of a full-size pitch resurface. So it's not an insubstantial amount of money. I'm not saying that. But in the scale of a 250, maybe £1,000 investment to resurface a pitch, it's not a huge percentage more than what you'd already be paying. Some customers are going, we want to do it because it's the right thing to do, and we've got sustainability goals. We could potentially even get grants for that, where we can demonstrate a reduction on the impact of the environment. Others are saying, do you know what? It's not a legislation. We don't have to do it. We've got a finite budget, and as much as we'd love to do it, we can't do it on this occasion. But what we will do is build it into our sink fund plans for 10 years' time, and we'll dispose of the new surface in that way. So there's all these, again, end-of-life considerations. Your choice of surface and infill will potentially impact on what that looks like as well. I won't dwell on that as another almost separate presentation, but we can go through it with you. So that's the sort of arguments and the changes that are coming in, particularly for rubber crumb. There's much less impact on hockey type surfaces because they don't require this rubber crumb product. It's generally sand dressed or sand filled. You still have the impact on shock pads and surface choices and an end of life, but the rubber crumb element doesn't really affect hockey because they don't play on that type of surface. What we're now going to move on to is just the way that we can create options for you in terms of funding, and underpinning that with robust business cases, working in partnership with Edu. So we have an option called fast track funding. What we're finding is more and more common that even where customers had the vision and the need and the want, I suppose, to develop a sink fund, that sink fund is increasingly being used to cover costs elsewhere within a school site or a sports site. So we had one customer that had to re-roof the science block. As much as that sink fund was set up for the resurface of the pitch, the building came first. You've got to have a science block. You can't have water dripping through it. So that money was spent there. That left the resurface pot empty effectively. And so the only way that customer could do it was to look at something like fast track funding. So fast track funding is a way of spreading the costs over a period of up to 7 years. And again, we can work with you and EDU on income to find the sweet spot in that 7-year period where the income generated from the pitch will cover the cost of the repayments. And Nick will touch on what EDU do in a minute from a management point of view, lettings and income. We've been using fast track funding for 9 years, well, since 2012 actually, so nearly 10 and a bit. We've done just over 50 projects now, and we've funded over £17 million worth of facilities in that period. This is bona fide ways that the education sector can spread costs through an operating lease that has been passed by the ESFA on 2 occasions in that 9 years, and on every scheme has to pass independent audit, your academy audit or your trust auditors. So we work with specialist partners for the provision of leases in the education sector. They will work with you and your auditors to ensure that the plan, the fast track funding proposal passes muster against the operating lease tests that your auditors will no doubt want to press against the paperwork and the template and the agreements. But we've done it on 50 odd projects with lots of different trusts and academies. We've done it on 3 or 4 occasions with independent schools, but of course they have a greater freedom of procurement. But yeah, it's there, it can be used. And increasingly it's being used because costs are going up for one. So the cost of a resurface is more now than it would have been projected as being 10 years ago. So any sink fund you have, probably, you might be fortunate, but probably won't cover the cost of a resurface in 2023 because everything has gone up 20-30% in the last 18 months. That's surface, shock pads, tarmac, stone, everything you can think of, pretty much fencing particularly, is steel derived. Unfortunately for us, a lot of the steel is imported from Ukraine, where they produce a lot of European steel. A lot of that steel that's still being produced is being directed to government contracts and military contracts to support Ukraine as they battle against Russia. So there's less availability anyway, because a lot of those steel plants are out of commission due to the war. The steel that is still being produced around Europe is still coming through for fencing, but a portion of it that previously wasn't is being directed to other elements, government contracts and stuff. So the reality is that fencing's gone up quite a lot. So if you're a new build or you're looking to replace your fencing, certainly I can't foresee anybody planning the type of increases we've seen on that. So what we're doing with fast track funding is topping up either existing funds that you might have and still have, that sink fund or capital reserves, working with Edu and Nick and the team there to say, right, your pitch currently generates X. If we resurface, we think we can get it to Y, and that Y figure may well cover the cost of a project spread over 7 years, whether you have any capital contribution or not. So the ideal scenario is that the pitch pays for itself through lettings and income generated at evenings and weekends. Historically, we've been able to do that on new builds as well in certain parts of the country where there's a real demand and that the pitch can be used, 50 hours a week for community and school. In some areas that's still possible. It's increasingly difficult because cost of, as I say, fencing and lighting on a new build can often be too much to swallow. But what it does mean is that it's still a good option to consider on new builds, because it might still work, it might still pay for itself. Even if it doesn't, it probably will be a manageable shortfall. And at the end of the funding period, all that income then goes to you or in a share with the way that EDU work. So you can invest in other areas of the site. As one business manager said, there's no other investment I can make as a business manager aside from a sports facility that's floodlit that can generate me an additional, in her case, £35,000–40,000 a year, that gives her flexibility within her budget to spend in different ways. So not everywhere, doesn't work everywhere, nothing ever does, but more often than not, we can demonstrate that there's a really robust, sustainable business case underpinned through community use to pay for a pitch resurface or a new build with a fast track funding type approach, spreading the costs over a period of 7 years. So it's a great way to look at things. Even if it doesn't quite work for you, it's an option that probably is worth considering. If you've got capital reserves, as some trusts still do, then yeah, it might be something you look at, but think, well, actually, I can either borrow at a better rate or I can use capital reserves and do it in a way that suits us better. But nonetheless, it's a good option to consider. So I'm going to pass you over to Edu at that point, because they can then go on to explain exactly how it works from a management letting point of view. And I'm going to mute and go silent.
Thanks, Duncan. Just to introduce myself, my name's Nick. I am founder and co-owner of Edu Lettings. We are a fully managed lettings provider, and without any further ado, I'm just going to play a short video for you just to introduce ourselves.
Edu Lettings are a fully managed lettings provider, so we utilise the assets of schools through income generation from the use of their facilities to community bookings.
Yeah, collectively as a team, we link up the different sections of the business together, ensuring that the ultimate goal of school facilities being maximised and opportunities for the local community. Putting it together, having some fun while we do it, relaxing and enjoying what we do.
The support's amazing. We work as a team really well. We're more like a family than anything. I feel proud of the impact we have on both the communities and the schools that we work with across the country.
There's nothing better than working in the community and going around to different venues and different sites, different ages, different cultures, different groups, obviously all enjoying watching them do the activities that they love. And for us to open the venues and give that back to the community is just a great feeling. I've got children myself, and obviously being part of that grassroots is just great at watching people go soon.
The company have been really easy to work with right from the very start when we began to work with each other and to plan how we were going to make the most of the facilities that we have. There was just an open and transparent approach.
I think working together as a team, if I could describe it with one word, it'd probably be more family. But also it's giving back to the community in one way in terms of what we provide the schools and what the schools ultimately gain from us.
Working with Edu Lettings is an extremely easy process. It's more a partnership. It's not them just wanting their own way and what they want. It's an open conversation and it's very, very easy to deal with.
Our partnerships with school goes much beyond lettings. We help with open evenings and parents' evening, car parks, attendance. So from there, it's not just about the letting provision, even though that's our bread and butter. We want to help schools increase footfall from community for future students, capital investment back into facilities to increase the education provision of that side as well.
Knowing that you're making a difference makes every day a bit easier, being able to see the sort of outcomes of the work that we do, seeing a lot more people being engaged in sport activity and community groups is always rewarding for the team.
Fantastic. So I hope that sort of gives you a little bit of a flavour of who we are. And Mark, if you just want to go on to the next slide, thank you. And from that perspective, how can we help you? And certainly following on from Duncan's presentation, from that perspective, we work with you in utilising your assets, not only just in terms of increasing income generation, obviously helping you with your budget, and some of the things that we do for you is we staff the site in full, from opening and closing and the security of your venue, cleaning and ensuring the school is most importantly ready for education the next day. And in terms of our operational structure, is much different than a lot of our competitors, where we have a centralized function. And certainly if you look over my right shoulder there, you'll see a lot of our team there who work with our hirers and community groups up and down the country, you know, one email, one telephone number, one booking system, in terms of ensuring that your facilities are maximised and are utilised as much as they possibly can be. We also have an online platform, and the best way that I can describe this is sort of a booking.com or an Airbnb, you know, where each in particular of our partner venues has their own particular site. You could able to go on their site, pick your school, pick your facility, your day, your time, all the way through to inserting your safeguarding DBS documents, insurance documents, etc., to then making payment there and then. So for 365 days, 24/7, your facilities are available to book for your community. And equally from that as well, we do have implement a marketing strategy to ensure that we're maximising the income generation through your facilities. Currently, we work with over 75 facilities nationwide, in a range of schools, from new builds to schools that were built in the 60s and 70s, you know. And equally with those sites, as you can see on the picture at the bottom, we are invested through partners such as Not Sports, not only just in terms of capital investment through the case studies I'll discuss in a second, but equally helping academies and schools understand fast track funding and the money that they can generate through their facilities, as Duncan rightly said on the last slide, to pay for these facilities to occur and not have any further impact on school budgets going forward. It also improves the PE provision, enhances the reputation of the school and academy through their community use. And certainly two of the case studies which I do want to speak about is Barlow High School, which is over in Manchester. We looked at a resurfacing an end-of-life sand-filled 9v9 pitch, which literally flooded every time there was an ounce of rain. And if you know Manchester, that happens quite often. But from that perspective, they went from generating next to nothing on that pitch to resurfacing it and now generating over £60,000 per annum just through that facility. So not equally now is it only not paying for that resurfacing, and equally the sink fund going forward, looking at a resurfacing project in 10 years' time, is also now inserting additional money back into school budgets to pay for teaching assistants, new books, and obviously improvements throughout the schools or academies. And equally a very similar story over at Ladybridge High School in Bolton as well, which is actually our flagship site and our first site that we started working with. They resurfaced a 7v7 AstroTurf, and now they're generating over £35,000 per annum through that facility as well. One slight little thing that I will speak about, and certainly Duncan did touch on it in terms of building a business case for your site. Equally, we will help as well in terms of ensuring that the markings, for example, on certain pitches are correct, and you are maximising community usage and income generation for that as well. If you do want to hear more, then obviously I am available at any time. And if you do like to visit our website, edu-lettings.org. But on my next slide, I just want to provide you with a small little video again, just in terms of what our schools say about us. And if you do want to hear more, please reach out, and I'm more than happy to come and see you at any particular point.
Before we worked with Edu Letting, we had real issues in terms of staffing the leisure centre and our facilities at school, and in terms of bookings, we needed a more modernised approach to bookings.
So the impact has been really good. We've had lots of footfall through the door, lots of the community using the school and the facilities, which were brilliant. And obviously it's helped funded our new AstroTurf, which we have, and just other general things that budget can't support at the moment. We
worked with Edu Letting, started to work with them around about 3 years ago now, and within a few days, certainly within a few weeks, things were transformed. We had a system in place for bookings. We're fully staffed all the time, and it's a complete turnaround in terms of financial position.
They're just very easy to work with, and it is a two-way conversation. The door is always open. It's a really good proactive partnership between us, and we're passing a lot on to the community, and that's what, again, for myself and from Edu Lettings.
Well, over the last year, we have had significant income because we started hiring out all the rooms inside the school instead of just the external facilities. And so that impact has been brilliant, and we've been able to afford to buy our new AstroTurf, which again supports the school, supports the community, and everyone around.
Fantastic. So just to finish off with that, and like I said, I hope the message is strong there in terms of what we can do for your school or academy, and equally not just in terms of lettings, but like I said, working with Not Sports and looking at the resurfacing and reinvestment into your facilities. So from there, I'll hand back over to Duncan, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Nick. Hopefully you can hear me again now. So yeah, we said it'd be about an hour, so we're about on time because we started 5 minutes later than we said. So in summary, Nick's covered the management side of things really on those 2 slides, which is great. I think both of us would just like you guys to pick up the phone and have a chat with us about what you're looking to achieve and see how best we can support you in the short, medium and long term. We thought it'd be useful, rather than just going back over all the slides, just perhaps to say from our point of view, and we've got a couple of points at the bottom for Edu as well, that it's about asking good questions, I suppose, in some ways, because there are a lot of changes. There's going to be a lot of innovation coming on the market in the next year or two in artificial turf technology. Some of those will be great, I'm sure they will be. Some of them perhaps less so, as ever in life with anything new. So working with designers, with specialists is probably going to be increasingly important, just so you get somebody that you can use as a sounding board, just to cut through some of the marketing spiel that will come out on some of the new products. And also just to give you the black and white of what the changes to the legislation, like that microplastics ban, what it actually means to you as a customer, so you can make informed decisions. So if you can ask good questions, and that's what this slide is all about, really, hopefully you can get good answers from companies like us and Nick, and then you can make informed decisions moving forward. So what are the latest developments? Well, we've covered some of them. Who can we learn from? Who's used some of the new products? You know, we're doing 30 odd projects a year these days. We're highly likely to have come across whatever it is you're being told is the new fantastic innovation and new product. So who's used it? What can we learn from that? Have things gone well? Is there changes that we could incorporate with our project so we limit some of the issues they had? Are there recycled material products that we can use in our design and solutions? If we're looking at sustainability, using the recycled and recyclable products is quite important in terms of from an environmental point of view. Are they sustainable in terms of a manufacturing? So yeah, great if they're recycling material, but are they doing it in a sustainable way, or is it, you know, pumping out loads of CO2 or whatever it may be to get that recycled product? So again, we can do that assessment with you. We haven't included it on this presentation, but there is a a product environmental scoring system that's coming into the European Union in the next probably 12 or 18 months. Whether Britain adopts it straight away, I'm not sure, because obviously as a result of Brexit, we don't necessarily need to. Britain doesn't want to be seen as the polluter of Europe. So whilst, again, the microplastics ban, we could say, well, we're not part of the EU, we'll ignore that. We don't want to be seen as the polluter of Europe. So we will be adopting these these new legislations as they come in. The product environmental framework, PEF, that will allow you as customers to basically go onto the PEF website and in theory go, what's the least impactful artificial turf system? All those products will have been scored within the framework, and then you'll get a scale of this system on your site is going to produce the least impact on the environment. Now, whether it actually works like that from day one, who knows? But all governments in Europe have agreed to sign up to it when it's ready. There are what's the word? Pilot studies. That's the word I'm looking for. Pilot studies happening on that at the moment. It was supposed to happen next year. Doesn't seem likely. But again, talk to us, and again, we can direct you towards that if that's something you want to look at. But recycled content would obviously be a high scoring factor in all that environmental impact scoring. Can we reduce quarried aggregates? Can we recycle existing systems, bases, fencing, lighting? Can we relamp rather than ripping out? What we want to do is create a sustainable design for you, limiting the impact on the environment, limiting the cost that it's going to be for you as a customer, so that the income that can be generated through Nick and his team it creates the most sustainable financial case as well. Our job is to try and get your project over the line. Best way we can do that is to produce designs and products and systems and solutions that tick all the boxes, not just tick on the environmental, but it's 50% more, because that isn't really going to pass muster. There's products and solutions coming on the market that are also bringing long-standing performance warranties. So many of those are recycled, many of those are recyclable. It's a different way of building pitches or resurfacing pitches, but again, we can look at those with you. It might cost, say, 10-15% more, but it will, in shock pad terms, for example, it's probably going to save you maybe £50,000 every point of resurface there on in. So yeah, a little bit more capital cost, but from a life cost analysis, it's probably going to be a more sustainable option depending on your circumstances. Just a final few slides. How can we future-proof that design and plan with one eye on the future, both from a cost point of view, so that we don't get to a resurface and then find we've got to use all that income we've generated for 10, 12 years to resurface? Can we future-proof the design now so that when it comes to resurface, it's limiting the cost at that point? Just mentioned about shock pads, but potentially being considerations in that sort of way of thinking. What, if any, funding options are available? So fast track funding's there and to be used. It's being used as we speak for customers in the education sector and underpinning a business case with income generated from lettings. There's also funding options in traditional grants. Depending on where you are in the country, will depend on what size and where they are. Local authorities have Section 106 monies, which is derived from housing developments. Quite often they're available for community sport facilities. Again, we can guide you, and with our relationships with governing bodies like football, hockey, rugby as well, we can get them to support the project, which often is a key tenet of securing traditional grant aid. You can't really get grant aid these days without getting governing body backing. Working with companies like us who work with governing bodies day in, day out is a way of at least identifying if that's possible. And then also, how soon can you start generating, or how could you start generating revenue? So do we future-proof the design now, or do we just take a 3G pitch? If it's in 2023, 95% football, is that always going to be the case? If it is, you're probably going to go down the route of a 3G surface solely for football without the shock pad for rugby. But is there a club in the local area that's really growing in the rugby area, rugby sport? And are they going to need training facilities in years 4, 5, 6? And therefore, can we generate revenue from them later in the life of the pitch? Can we future-proof our investment? But the reality is, as soon as the pitch is complete, there is no reason why you can't start generating revenue the hour after handover, basically. So we'll be handing over projects this winter, the very next evening or that evening itself, when we complete handover in the daytime, community use will start and you'll be generating income straight away. So these are sort of particularly resurfaces or tarmac upgrade schemes that we touched on earlier, quite quick installations. They can be sort of 4 weeks-ish if it's a straightforward resurface. So we can complete it in a quick time frame. The fastest we've ever delivered a pitch resurface from inquiry to completion was about just pre-Brexit. We got an inquiry off the back of a webinar like this in December, and we completed the pitch resurface by the end of March. So that's how quickly we can get through working with partners like Nick and his team for the business case to underpin it. On a new build, you're in the lap of the gods, unfortunately, with planners. You know, planning can take a hellishly long time these days, even where it looks like a straightforward project. So the fastest we've done recently is a 7-week planning process with 3 to 4 months leading to get the designs and all the surveys done for the planning. We mentioned drainage right at the start. So you've got 3 or 4 months, and then planning could take as quickly as 7 weeks from submission. We've got projects that are sat there waiting for environmental health to comment that have been in the planning process for 6-7 months. There's nothing we can do about that. It's down to resource and availability in the local authority. So, and obviously they're stretched. So a new build, you're really looking at, with a fair wind, we could probably get a new build completed by this time next year if you picked up the phone to us today or tomorrow. Perhaps more realistically, with planning, it might well be spring the following year, so about an 18-month gestation for a new build. So 3 to 4 months could be a resurface from start of inquiry to finish. On a new build, could be 12 months, perhaps nearer 18 in the way planning is at the moment. So what I've already said it really. We'll be we're recording this presentation, so we'll be sharing this out wide and far on YouTube and to sign-ups that haven't unfortunately made it today. But the next step we would like is to speak to you, understand what it is that you've either got in terms of a pitch and you're looking to resurface or improve. Maybe it's a bank of tarmac courts that you think can generate additional income, as we're doing with a lot of schools at the moment. And then we'll partner with Nick and his team once we've done our initial feasibility, or at the same time, meet up on site and guide you through what the options are, identify what the costs are going to be, and then take you right through a full design consultancy, identifying all the things we've gone through, taking you through planning. If you need planning, we can act as your planning agent, to a point where we can tender it. So we'll write the specification. I said we're not a contractor, so we'll write that specification and tender package, invite specialist companies to tender for the construction of whatever it is you're looking to do. You'll receive typically 6 tender returns. We'll help you assess them, and then we'll project manage the installation by whichever company it is that you've agreed to deliver the project. So we're here to help right from day one all the way through to completion, partnering with Nick and his team on lettings, and also partnering with specialists in the education finance side if you wanted to take the fast track funding forward. So really the next step is get in touch, speak to Nick, speak to us, and we'll hopefully be able to provide you with some good quality information that you can make some informed decisions against. Thank you for listening. We're not far off about right time wise. We have got time for questions. I don't think we've got anything on the chat. You can obviously email us separately to this if you want to get in touch with questions. I'd like to say thank you. I'll have to go on mute and turn the sound off again, and then Nick can say thanks as well. But thank you for listening. I hope it was of interest and of use, and hopefully I'll speak to you and see you at your site in the weeks to come.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, Duncan, thanks for obviously taking the time to listen to Duncan's presentation, and equally the information about EDU lettings. And like I said, if you do want to speak to us about your lettings provision, whether it be current or a new lettings provision that you want to start at your school or academy, please do get in touch, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thanks very much and have a good day.